Welcome to this edition of FYI. Eli in the studio. Joining me today is my good friend and KCRT's good friend, Mr. Greg Feinman. He's back for the 5th time. UOR Investigations. He has more interesting information to share with our listeners in New Mexico as well as in southern Colorado. As always, Greg, it's a pleasure to have you on our show today.
And I love being here, Eli.
Well, we love having you here. Yes, you're quite intriguing, and the fascination with all of your investigations has just been phenomenal. More feedback, in case you haven't listened, and if you haven't, it's shame on you. Greg is a retired police officer and medic, and I asked you this in the very first interview, Greg. Did you ever think after you retired from these agencies that you would take up a new career that is most compelling, interesting, and intriguing?
I be honest with you, no. I didn't. Not that I didn't think that maybe I wouldn't investigate the cattle mutilations, but to get as far as I did with them, with the investigation, I would have never guessed. I would have never guessed that we would have uncovered what we did.
I need to ask you, too, because the last time we spoke, you were still working on the documentary.
Well, yeah, we're still working on that. And I got to say that the editor that was going to edit the movie, he agreed to do it. And no sooner do we get the documentary done, he develops cancer and dies. And then the producer of the show, sadly, his girlfriend, I believe, or wife died just suddenly. And it slowed the whole thing down because of the deaths. So, you know, it's, and to be honest with you, I don't think that's a coincidence.
I was going to ask you that because, well, we know about FITS, Friends in the Sky, but we know about alien tribes that do not want you to put out this documentary.
That's a fact. They don't want me to keep doing what I'm doing. They don't want Sue to keep doing what she's doing. And here's the thing is we don't know why they're against us. You know, why they're against us. I just know they are. They don't like us whatsoever. And Sue is extremely sick. I mean,
I was going to ask you, how is she doing now, Greg?
Well, she just got diagnosed with kidney failure, kidney disease. She was diagnosed with liver failure, I believe end-stage liver failure, and all this just came about during the investigation.
I was going to ask you too, Greg, for our listeners who are not familiar with Mama Sue, give us a condensed overview about her and her nature.
Okay. First of all, I didn't do this investigation alone. There was 3 people involved in this that deservedly needs to be recognized. And the first one is Mama Sue. Mama Sue, if it wasn't for her, I would literally just have a bunch of dead cows on a ranch. I wouldn't have what we have now. It wouldn't even be close without her.
It'd be pretty meaningless, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would have been just me investigating what's done to the cows and making a guess based off of that. But without her, I'd have nothing. And since the beginning of the investigation, I've grown to love her very much. She's a very dear friend of mine. We're very close. We're connected, and we always will be.
I've had people come up to me and speak very highly about our interviews, how they've recorded them and kept them, and they made some references to the Skinwalker Ranch and the Miller Ranch, which I found was very compelling.
Well, yeah, there was a documentary. I haven't seen that documentary, but they did a documentary regarding it. And I was telling that to Tom way back that, you know, his ranch was just another Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, and then it wasn't, but maybe a month later that ancient aliens came out there and they had brought him a piece of machinery out there that that evidently, I don't know what it was. It might have been a magnetometer, but whatever it is, it's supposed to read a number 9 everywhere in the world. But on that ranch, on the Miller Ranch, it reads a 0. And one of the only other places that it reads a 0 is Skinwalker Ranch.
Wow. So both ranches have something very synonymously in common.
What the big deal is, I honestly believe it's the portal that's on the property. I think that's the key to everything.
Well, in our past interviews, we talked about some of your equipment being ruined because you hit a horse one night.
Yes.
Out east. And it seemed like they wanted to prevent you from doing what you do best, and that's your investigation.
Yeah, it's that whole thing was crazy. That whole, they don't like you, Greg, and they're going to destroy your Jeep and everything else of yours. And within a week, both of my computers are down, and within 3 months, in 3 months, I don't go very many places. So I was coming back from the ranch, and like I said, I hit those horses, and it wasn't normal. It looked like those horses were being led out there, but it is what it is. It happened. They said it was going to happen, and it happened.
You were very proficient in law enforcement as well as being a medic. Greg, did this help you further investigate these disappearances and maybe the missing persons case that we talked about, I believe, almost a year ago?
Well, you learn a method as a cop. You learn how to investigate. You develop your own style of investigation, and you just go with the facts of what you get. And, not just anybody could take on a investigation like this. You've got to have credibility behind you. You've got to have some sort of life of credibility where, you've been in positions of trust and, either a public servant or whatever, because what you're going to find and the information you're going to get is going to be so hard to believe that the only way you're going to believe it if it's coming from someone that's credible.
The government has not been truthful with the American public for the last maybe 6-7 decades since Roswell. Isn't it amazing how now so many people are just questioning why the government is concealing things that we should know about? Is it because we would be too alarmed because of social media? Would there be a hysterical pandemic emotionally, just like War of the Worlds?
Well, if they know what me and Mama Sue know, then maybe they're worried about people panicking or whatever. And what I'm doing is I'm not trying to scare. I'm trying to prepare.
Exactly.
And there's a difference, because we do have hope, bottom line, well, we can talk about that in a little bit. Before I get too far off track, there's a couple other people that were involved in this investigation I'd like to bring up.
You bet.
Other than Mama Sue, a gentleman that I grew up with by the name of Dan Lindholm, he's with Big Truth, and when he was 18 years old, he had an Omaha experience where he actually witnessed one. And it was always from his accounts that I believed that Sasquatch existed, because I grew up with Dan. And all my life, the guy's always been trustworthy. He's never lied about anything. The whole time I knew him, he was all into Y&T and music and, rock bands. He wasn't there was no paranormal anything.
Okay.
So anyways, he acted like a consultant for me because he had been doing investigations with Sasquatch, and he acted like a consultant for me. And then he started to ask questions for me to ask Fitz. And then, I communicated with him when we started gifting apples to Omaha, and I was telling him that, they're not taking them yet. And he said, it could take up to 2 years. And then he said, Greg, next time you go out, make sure you take a bite out of the apple just to let them know it's good. And I didn't think that, I was like, well, who'd want a half-eaten apple? But
right.
But anyways, I did that, and that very time they took them. They took all the apples.
I was going to ask you about the apples that you put out. And you've done that at the Miller Ranch, haven't you? Yes. And Greg, I was going to ask you too, what has transpired since last we spoke? You spent outings out there at the Miller Ranch. I know you sent me an audio sound clip of something that was kind of gave me goosebumps.
Well, it was the message that Mama Sue got.
Yeah.
And they've told us because of her sickness, her illness, that we don't have to go out to the ranch to communicate with them. We don't have to go out there to there. We do it more for, what's the word, being more of tradition.
Okay.
That you're going out there and, when we get ready to go, we can feel the anticipation that they're feeling when they know we're coming out. And it's just an exciting feeling to go out there and boom, they're immediately communicating. But they told us that we don't have to go out there because there's been a couple times it was unsafe. And they said, listen, you can just stay at home and do it. But Mama Sue has been so sick and she's been in the hospital, we haven't been able to do much.
Do you think that this has taken a lot out of her, the research and the investigations
100%.
that she's done with you?
100%.
And I know Fitz is not behind this, but a lot of alien tribes do not want to see her around.
Well, if you remember that she said she was taken by that reptilian tribe and they had her hanging upside down by her left foot.
Right.
And, she's frail. She can't handle that kind of stuff. And I mean, I saw her.
You showed me the markings. You showed me exactly the bruises and everything.
She's taken a beating on this. And we were at one.
It's got to take a toll mentally as well.
Well, yeah, we were at one investigation site and we ended up stopping the investigation on this other place because what I already had was enough. But we were out communicating with we were communicating with a spirit, and she started calling out what she believed was a demon. And she started calling it out. She was saying a lot of bad words. And the next thing I saw was all the wind get knocked out of Mama Sue, her back bent like someone hit her, and she went flying 10 feet and landed on top of a grave marker, breaking the grave marker. And I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, she got hit so hard that I thought she was going to break something. I mean, it was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it.
People have actually said, we're talking about portals and we're talking about time that has been lost because during abductions, like you stated, there's no relevance of time.
Well, from what I know, and this isn't, like I can't say for every person that's ever been taken. I know in my case that they do it in between the seconds because they have traveled dimensions to get here and not galaxies. Okay, so like I've said, Fitz has not traveled galaxies to get here as much as they've traveled dimensions. And because they're traveling dimensions, they're from another whole different time. And they know how to manipulate time, they can't interact with time. They can't go back in time and change it, but they can manipulate time. And when they take you and they bring you to where they're at in their area, your hair still grows, your fingernails grow, all that. And you could be there for 6 hours. But what they do is when they put you back in the same second that they took you. But you've got this reverse time loss where you've lived, a few hours in 1 second. And and that's where the time loss comes in, that you're trying to figure it out. Is it's more of a reverse time loss in my case.
I just thought of a question to ask you. Their time travel, their craft is probably very highly sophisticated. And I'm sure they're traveling past the speed of sound. Do you believe they're breaking, you can actually hear a sound barrier when they're breaking the speed of sound?
I don't believe so because I don't believe they're actually doing that speed.
Okay.
It may look like they're doing that speed, but if you've heard of any crafts that have done like these 90-degree right angles at high speed, anything in that craft would be killed.
That's true.
So they've got to have like
Good
a
point.
dampener or something that I believe it's like a dampener that they're indeed, when you're looking at it, it looks like they're really going fast. Now, here is something that a lot of people don't know. When a UFO, let's just imagine a flying saucer, and you're looking at a flying saucer in the sky. You look at it looking, like at the side of it, you just see it kind of flat.
Yeah, like a level playing field.
It's like, it's like a, okay, so you see the craft flat, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But in space, they travel belly first. The craft is actually pointing what is gravity emitters, and this is per Bob Lazar, that these gravity emitters are able to bend space and time and actually bring point B to them, and all they have to do is dip into it, and they're there. And that's how they're able to travel long distances, and that's why they're not really, breaking the sound barrier when they're doing it.
If you were just joining us on this edition of FYI, I'm speaking with Greg Feinman, UR Investigation. He initiated this years back. He's been most interesting. The greatest, some of the best interviews here on FYI have come from Greg. Very intriguing, very compelling, and it brings up a lot of questions that a lot of people have concerning cattle mutilations and alien abductions, as well as cloud formations. And I guess we were talking, I remember the first interview, we talked about skeptics in the realm of paranormal that have some scientific explanations, but you have actually differed in their opinions about what's going on today.
Well, again, there's a difference between people that have investigated for a long time, gathering facts that they've gathered over a period of many years. And then there's what happened with me and Sue, Mama Sue, where we were just given all this information. We made contact. We went out the day that we went out to do the first reading, the first cow. A link was established that day. And they chose to talk to us, not, people, that have millions of dollars, not people that have bought ranches to try to find out what's going on the ranches. They chose to talk to us. And the reason why is because me and Sue are humble. We come out there with limited equipment, and we're just trying, all I wanted to do was make friends and learn a little bit and tell their story the way they wanted their story told.
When is the last time you made contact with Fitz?
Well,
I mean, I'm sure periodically you have some correlation with Friends in the Sky.
Well, yeah. I don't have a habit of, telling people that on the radio that I'm talking telepathically to aliens, but I am. I mean, plain and simple. And the reason I can say that is because I am. I'm not making this up.
You've had how many podcasts, and you've been in a lot of different avenues of talk shows.
Yeah, and, that's another person that I need to thank.
We need to get you on Coast to Coast.
Yeah, I mean, another one I'd like to thank is Ryan Singer. It was his show.
I've listened to your podcast.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for him, he was the first one to let me tell my story, and he was intrigued, and then he took part in the investigation, and he's part of this. So if it wasn't for those three people, picking up, and even Ed Brown, the producer, who knows where we'd be right now. We're still in the process of editing, but we don't know how long that's going to take.
Have you encountered any recent cattle mutilations? I know maybe not in Colorado, but there's been a few outside of the state that I've read about.
There was one not too long ago, I believe, in Aguilar.
That's true. We talked about that, I believe, yeah.
And what we did know was on the last reading that we did, and that was December 25th, 2021. They said that the ones responsible were the reptilians, and they said that there's going to be an increase in cattle mutilations on ranches that have never had the problem.
Really? What is that telling you as a investigator? What is that telling you?
Well, it tells me that at least Fitz is protecting their properties, and because it's on ranches that have never had the problem. And they're different because they don't have the same technology as Fitz does. So they can't do the same thing. They can't make a cow bloodless like Fitz can. And Fitz has figured a way to be able to drain the blood so lightning quick that it's just gone.
Turn back the page. What was your initial reaction when you first saw a mutilated cow?
Well,
with no blood, perfectly extracted organs.
That is the surreal thing that you look at the thing that you're looking at when you're at one, and you're looking. And as a paramedic, I picked up people that had a little cut on their arm, and it looked like an axe murder happened inside the house because of that little cut. And these cows are cut up severely everywhere, and and they got like 10, 11 gallons of blood, and there's not even one little drop. And one of rancher has said, what Tom Miller has said, is that he believes they're taking the blood from the left upper chest, where every one of his cows that have been killed has had this hole in the left upper chest of the cow.
I think I asked you this in one of our other interviews. Do you think they're using the blood to start another life form?
They definitely have. They have created autonomous beings.
Autonomous,
but they don't have a soul. And that's what they're trying to figure out, is trying to animate those with a soul, trying to animate those bodies. And, okay, imagine you're going to transport somebody 10 million miles. And you can transport either them as a human body, or you can transport their spirit. All right, now, with a body comes a mouth, and with a mouth comes complaints, and where's this and where's that? And are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Yeah.
And then, or how many spirits can you fit in a bottle? And then you get them to where they're going, and then they animate. That's what they're trying to do. But God's in control of this, and they're going to, like I said, God's in control, and that's all they need to know.
Greg, we have 2 minutes left for this edition of FYI. Tell our listeners, both in New Mexico and Colorado, what else would you like to share on our show today?
Okay, all I got to say is this. If you believe anything that I've said, anything, and that I've said, they told us to tell people to get right with God, all right? And if you believe anything I've said, I just implore you to go into your bathroom, turn on the light, take a good look at yourself in the mirror, and ask yourself one question. Are you ready for Christ's return? And if you can't say yes wholeheartedly, then you got to fix it. And I don't know what fixing it is for you. It's different for everybody.
Sure.
But all you have to do is believe that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. You got to understand, when you say get right with God, a lot of times people say, oh, I've been a good person all my life. But guess what? You can't good your way to heaven. There's no amount of good works that you can do. Of course, faith without works is dead. All right. But there's no amount of good works you can do. You've got to believe Christ died for our sins. And that's it. Plain and simple. And you'll be saved through what's going to happen, not from it, but through it.
Greg, you're always welcome here at radio station KCRT. Can't wait for the next interview. God bless you, and thank you for everything you do and everything you're about to do.
Well, and thank you very much for having me, Eli. I really love being here. I love explaining this to everyone, because that's what we're supposed to do.
Thank you, Greg.
All right.